What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Glass Less Traveled. My name is Mike Vreevy. I'm the founder of the Fox Valley Whiskey Society, and today I have got a super exciting video review for you guys. Bomberger's Declaration Bourbon 2021. Now, I spent some time down in Louisville in September for the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. Unfortunately, somebody had a little bit too much to drink that Friday night with some friends at Bourbon's Bistro, and I felt like death the following morning, and I didn't even make it to the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. But my good friend was able to make it, and he said, with the way that you're feeling today, you probably would have died anyways. So fortunately, the night that I pulled into town, I did end up going shopping. We went to Total Wine. We went to a handful of different liquor stores, including Westport Wine and Whiskey, and picked up a ton of stuff. I came home and my wife asked me how much money I spent, and I told her every bit of $1,000. On the Friday that I was there, I pulled into town on Thursday, and on Friday I decided to go into downtown Louisville by myself. I was the only one. Drove all the way from South Carolina into Louisville. It was a 10-hour drive. I decided to go to Michters because I wanted to find specifically this bottle. Now, Bombergers, Schenks, Michters all kind of live in that same world of history. They're all kind of tied together. This is going to be a fresh crack. I have not even opened this yet, and Kentucky Bourbon Festival was in September. It is currently November 7th. I have not opened this one yet. I do have a Schenks in there. I don't have the most recent Schenks. Schenks that I have is the 2020 edition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crack this bad boy open, and we are going to try it. Good bourbon is meant for drinking. Expensive bourbon is meant for drinking. All bourbon is meant for drinking. Boom. Pop it open. Pour it. MSRP on this bottle sits right around $90. I was able to pick this up at the Michters Distillery in downtown Louisville for a cool $99.95. Comes in at 108 proof. This is the 2021 release. This is bottle 896 of 1,735, batch 21E1369, distilled and bottled in Kentucky. I'm not going to dive into the history of Bombergers as much as I would love to nerd out over the history of Bombergers and the Schenk brothers and Michters itself. I'm going to leave that for you guys to go ahead and Google. Long or the short, the Schenk brothers opened up a distillery in the middle part of the 18th century, in the 1750s. Sold it to a gentleman by the name of Abe Bomberger. The family sold it to a gentleman by the name of Abe Bomberger in the 1860s. It closed for prohibition. It reopened, and then it closed again in 1989, only to be purchased and renamed Michters. Now, this all happened in Pennsylvania. Michters itself is actually located in Louisville. There is a tie that the story goes that Michters was given to the soldiers of General George Washington, but that story is actually not true. Now, Schenks, maybe, since Schenks Distillery turned into the Bomberger Distillery, and the Bomberger Distillery defunct, which is now sitting abandoned in Pennsylvania, has now turned into Michters Distillery, which is now in Louisville. It's kind of a complicated story, but it's a fun one to read up on. So this is Bomberger's Declaration Bourbon 2021 release. Absolutely fantastic product. The Bomberger's 2020 was fantastic. The 2019 was fantastic. Schenks 2020 is absolutely fantastic. Really wonderful products that they're putting out. Again, this comes in at 108 proof. Now, something that was different from this release, the 2021 release that was done for this 2021 that was not done in the past, is a use of more of the Chinkapin oak, which is a varietal of oak that gives just a very unique kind of character. It lends a lot of toasted sugar and chocolatey notes to the bourbon. They seasoned the Chinkapin oak barrels longer, and they used more of them in this batch. So while there is no age statement on this batch, we do know that the Chinkapin oak barrels were seasoned for up to 3 years, which is an astronomical time to season the oak, which is, when they cut the tree down, they cut it into staves, and then those staves go outside, basically in the weather, to season. The nose, buttery. There's some toasted bread, caramel, some fruity notes that are in there. But what I really get is like a dried fruit, like an apricot or a plum almost. Nose is fantastic on this. Oh man, if I had a candle, if we can just make a candle out of this. The toast really comes through. It's those dried fruits that are really, really pronounced and really prevalent. The plum, the apricot, toasted sugar like the crust of a creme brulee. It's going for the taste. Oh. Ooh. It's almost a pomegranate, like a pomegranate juice. I drink pomegranate juice every morning. And that's the first thing that it reminded me of, was that dark, rich pomegranate juice. And there's this, oh my goodness, toasted sugar, brown sugar. There's that fruit note, that pomegranate is coming in, some orchard. There's a lot of chocolate in there, dark chocolate, milk chocolate. Wow, that is absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. I will say it's 108 proof, 54% alcohol. This one does drink a little bit hotter than 108 proof. If you were to tell me that maybe this is around the 115 to 120 range, it's probably what I would say that it's at. It's 108, so it drinks a little bit hotter. This one would be, could probably, not ice. I wouldn't say ice, but maybe a couple drops of water. Oh my goodness. That palate. I'm going to write down pomegranate. That is a note that I've never, ever written down for a bourbon. It's a note that's never even come out of my mouth before when describing a bourbon. I just get that rich, not tropical fruit, but dark, deep, rich, red fruits. No strawberry, I will say. I'm going to say plum. The nose, definitely that apricot, but dried apricot. So it's a little bit more pronounced, a little bit more oomph. Finish is not, let's say medium length, slightly dry. Oak is definitely coming through. Seasoned wood. That milk chocolate comes through a little bit more on the finish. So I'm just going to put chocolate rather than milk chocolate, because I did get a little bit of dark chocolate in the nose. Palate has a little bit of dark chocolate as well. There's a mustiness, like walking into an antique store, that I get oftentimes with Schenks. Peppy Van Winkle sometimes has that note. If any of you guys have some of the old Jim Beam decanters, some of the old dusty decanters laying around that you sip on, sometimes you get that note, that antique store walking into like an old musty, dusty basement. That brown sugar comes through. That honey note comes through. Surprising for this one that I sometimes will pick up on Schenk's is a very slight saddle leather that I get sometimes on the finish with Schenk's. Bombergers, this is just, I mean, fruits all the way. That pomegranate, that plum, that apricot comes through. Those chocolate notes, some of those honey, that toasted sugar. There is a slight dryness to the palate. I'm going to add slight dryness on the palate as well as the finish. The chocolate really comes through. It's almost like a chocolate-covered raisin. So I'm going to add raisin to this as well. Raisin, fig, tobacco, kind of for me, are in that same world, that same kind of bubble of flavor. So a lot of times when I taste tobacco, I'll often kind of complement it with raisin or with fig. This is just absolutely spectacular. Absolutely spectacular. Definitely, I mean, let's face it, you're not going to find this on the shelf at any regular liquor store. You might find this on the shelf, behind the case at Binny's. One place that I know that does definitely get Schenk's in Illinois, at least in the Fox Valley, is going to be Global Brew in St. Charles. He does not get a lot of it, but he does get it. That's actually where I got my Schenk's 2020 last year for $100. The nose is, it's so spectacular on this. I've got a couple more reviews to film after this, and I might have to just pour myself a second glass. This is absolutely, absolutely fantastic. So my notes: toast, buttery, caramel, plum, apricot for the nose. Some of that mustiness, that dryness, that antique store comes through on the nose a little bit in the back at the very end. The palate: toasted sugar, chocolate, pomegranate. It's very unique. Plum, very slight dryness, and some raisin, fig, or tobacco. Again, I usually clump those together. Those are very similar for my palate. For my palate, at least, those three are very similar. That raisin, that fig, and that sweet tobacco. Finish: medium length. It doesn't last very long, which I'm actually okay with. Sometimes I don't really like a long finish. Sometimes I like it to just kind of be there, and then just kind of, hang around on the palate a little bit, feel that warmth going right down going through my throat and through my chest. And then I just kind of want to be on with it. It is slightly dry. I do get some of that oak in the back, really kind of more on the back of the palate. I get that oak. The chocolate kind of just resonates the cheeks, the roof of the mouth just kind of resonates everywhere else. I'm going to let this one sit for just a minute. It's interesting when I rinse my mouth out, get a little bit of licorice, black licorice. It was very faint. It was just there and it's gone. And I don't like black licorice, but that note that I got was it's actually pretty enjoyable. That antique store is coming through a little bit more. It's not a bad thing. Brown butter, some of that unctuousness, that umami comes through. Letting it sit for a little while. Rinsing your mouth out with water halfway through a tasting helps to open up the palate a little bit. Kind of dissolves some of those compounds that are sitting on the roof of your mouth and your cheeks and on your tongue, and allows you to kind of new flavors to be introduced. Water sinks down, you salivate a little bit. So all of those little chemical compounds and those molecules, those flavor molecules that are sitting on your tongue from the previous tasting, dissolve a little bit in the water, dissolve a little bit with your saliva, helps you taste new things. So I always recommend letting it sit for just a minute, rinsing your mouth out with water, going back to the same bourbon, finding some new flavors that have opened up. As a glass gets a little bit less full, a little bit more shallow, alcohol is allowed to evaporate a little bit more. There's more air sitting, from here to here. Those buttery notes come through. The plum is really pronounced. Chocolate, but kind of both dark and milk chocolate. Oak. Again, that slight dryness. I don't get anything particularly new on the palate. Honey. Something tannic about this almost. Not like you would find in like a port or a sherry finished bourbon or some sort of fortified wine finished bourbon. But there is something tannic about this as well that just kind of stings. It's very, kind of like black pepper and white pepper kind of sting your palate. It's almost like needles dancing on your tongue. But there's a fruitiness, almost like a berry, that's it's also sitting there. I'm not going to write like a raspberry or a blackberry on there, but there's like almost like a berry sort of thing going on. Very, very interesting. So for 108 proof, if you can find it, that's the key. If you can find it for 108 proof, $89 retail MSRP. This one you can pick up. You might still be able to pick it up at the Michters Distillery in downtown Louisville for $100. That's what I picked it up for. Definitely a treat. Something when people come over, they look at and they say, "Oh, that's interesting. I've never had that. I've heard of it, but I've never actually tried it." It's definitely something interesting that you can pour for people. This being the 2021 release. This is, of course, a small batch, so this is mixed with other barrels. I do have just a little bit in my glass left here. I did a little tasting earlier in a video earlier with Elijah Craig barrel proof, so still have some of that left on my palate. I am going to revisit this one. Probably not do a video of it, but maybe just a quick write-up just for myself. I don't know what the oldest barrel that was put into this bourbon is. Michters is not a particularly old distillery, but they do have stocks that, I could see where that dryness comes from. Whether or not this is all Michters, whether or not some of these barrels were sourced, obviously they don't say. Absolutely fantastic. 108 proof, $89.99 MSRP. On the nose, toasted bread, buttery, caramel, plum, apricot, dried fruits, things like that. On the palate, toasted sugar, chocolate, pomegranate, which is so strange to me because I've never experienced that before in a bourbon. Plum, slight dryness, raisin, fig, sweet tobacco. Like I said, I kind of clump all those three together in one because for my palate, all three of those kind of they taste very similar. And some honey. The finish, medium length. It's not super long. Very slightly dry. You get those oak notes that come through really more on the finish than on the palate and on the nose. And then chocolate again, milk chocolate, dark chocolate, kind of like you would find at the store on the checkout aisle. You get that bag of Ghirardelli's chocolates. Really, really fantastic. 100% recommend if you can find it for the MSRP of basically $90. If you can find it for between $90 and $120, pardon me, I definitely recommend picking it up. It's one that it's just such an interesting bourbon to try. I'd be curious to what notes you guys have pulled out of that. If you found that pomegranate note in there that I found. Again, I drink pomegranate juice every morning, and it was one of the first things that kind of that I picked up on was that dark red fruit, that ruby fruit. Slight tannins in there, but again, this is not a finished bourbon, so this is not a fortified wine finished bourbon like a port or a sherry. Just get some of those tannins just kind of from the dryness, from the oakiness. If you can find it, 100% recommend picking it up for its MSRP of about $90. But again, if you can find it for between $90 and $120, I absolutely recommend picking it up. It is a special occasion bourbon. This is not going to be a regular sipper unless your bank account is much larger than mine and you can afford $90 plus as a everyday sipper. Good luck finding this, guys. It's one that's not readily available. Only comes out once a year. Usually towards the end of summer, beginning of fall, that it comes out. 100% recommend it. Comment below. Make sure to subscribe for new reviews and new videos every week. Hope to see you guys soon. Let me know what you think. See ya.